Hi everyone. Today you are with the girls today, or the women I should say. We've got Danielle, Elisma and Nick over here. And this is probably the first episode of our Modern Women podcast that we are really excited about, talking to all you women out there of different age groups and things that you may be concerned about or things you want to know a little bit more about. And today's podcast is going to be on the foundations of health. So we're going to go a little bit back to basics, looking at nutrition, exercise, stress management, sleep, and things like that. Because a lot of these areas in our lives, if they go wrong, or if we don't take care of those areas, they can kind of eventually lead to imbalances and then the development of chronic disease or other kinds of disorders. So it's very important for us to keep those foundations very healthy and keep paying attention to them, so we don't end up in situations that could have been very easily avoided through healthy lifestyle practices. So we're going to be looking at some of the challenges around those areas. We're also going to look at some solutions, advice we may offer in how you can find time and methods to take care of all of these areas in your life, and then also look at the importance and why they are relevant and why we need to take care of these areas in your lifestyle and in your environment. So we kind of like represent, we feel like a fairly large demographic of you guys out there. I myself am a mother of 2 teenage boys. We've got Danielle, who's the youngest one around here for anyone who hasn't noticed, I'm sure. And then we've got Nick, who's has a lot of experience in the exercise field, and she definitely represents,
the older woman.
No, I'd like
to
like to use the word mature and
wise.
What should I say? Wise.
I'd like to say wise.
Much better description.
I'm going to say wise, whether it's true or not.
Absolutely. So we hope that you guys find this interesting. But let's start with nutrition, because you both are nutritionists. Mm-hmm. And so I guess, what are the important areas in nutrition for you guys from an everyday health perspective in keeping yourselves healthy?
Nick, do you want to?
Well, basically, I just like to look at simplicity and balance, essentially. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, as you said, Lisma, coming from a fitness background, I have had the extreme side of dieting and nutrition. And so now for me, it's all about just having balance, having whole foods, getting that good quality food in on a daily basis, and not overthinking anything and not doing anything to, in extreme dieting or anything like that. I think that is it's a good basis for building on for whatever purpose you want to achieve. Yeah. But just that general whole food diet is a good foundation. That's usually what I follow.
Yeah, because we talked a little bit about that earlier, like, a lot of women, I don't think there's a single woman on this planet who hasn't done a diet at one stage in her life, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people a lot of women who follow different types of diets, whether it be keto, whether it be, even elimination diets and things like that. So that's very important what you say there, Nick, that it's sometimes, you just have to kind of go back to the basics in terms of, if you don't know what to do, the best thing you can do is just avoid processed foods and not worry too much about the amount of carbs and proteins and fats you take in. Exactly. Just avoid processed foods, and that's a very good place to start, right? Do you have anything to add to that, Danielle?
Yeah, definitely, Elizabeth. I think I agree with both of you in saying that when we come to nutrition, it's about the whole foods. It's if we can really start to look at what is something that's processed and refined that is in someone's diet, and is that something that's making up the bulk of their diet as well? That's one of the easiest places for us to start, and retraining ourselves and our clients to eat better from a whole foods perspective. What I've also, I guess I come at approach of is looking at identifying what works for you as well. So what foods you respond well to, what foods you enjoy having, and really starting to define your diet on your terms and listening to your body. I think that's the other thing. It's when we eat something, how are we feeling when we're eating that, after we're eating that, the next day? So really listening into those cues. So I think with the whole foods diet, it also is then listening to your body and how that's responding to that diet as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the 80-20% rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like if you do everything good or well 80% of the time, then the other 20% of the time when you fall a little bit off the wagon, it's not that big a deal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not about, I guess, letting yourself go without, you know, but I guess it's getting back to that special occasion thing where we used to have things on special occasions and then that became like, well, you have it every single day,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Just going back to that moderation approach.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's that word that we were all speaking about before. It's balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's where can we find balance?
Exactly.
And I think in the foundations that we're going to touch on today, in all of those categories, it's finding balance in those. So
yeah, definitely.
So for women, you know, whether they're single or they're mothers and they're looking for nutritional options for their families and for themselves, so when they go to the supermarket, you know, what's the kind of things that you can kind of think of that would make it, because there's a lot of challenges, right? I mean, these days, women have to be almost dietitians. They have to read labels, product labels. They have to know what all the numbers mean on those labels. It's not just as simple as just going to, you know, purchase good food or anything like that. Any challenges or tips that you can think of when we go to the supermarket and looking for food ideas?
Well, I think initially, just to keep it really basic, is stick to the outside of the supermarket. I mean, that's where you're going to find all your fresh fruits and vegetables. You're going to find your unprocessed foods, your meats, things like that. So, and all your processed stuff is in the aisles. So even if you can just stick to the outside, that's a really good start. And then you're getting all those good quality foods, those natural foods, unprocessed foods, and that's a good foundation to start with. So
that's great advice. Yeah. It is that typical thing, like, you know, all the packaged foods is kind of like in the middle, apart from your toilet paper and your toothpaste and stuff.
Well, no toilet paper at the moment.
Well, that's right. Yeah, good luck finding that, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of like how I always explain it to my clients as well. Look, if you're not sure, just stick to the outside aisles, and you can't go too wrong.
Exactly. I would say too, Elizabeth, if you are buying something that's packaged, and a lot of things are now, even things that we use in everyday cooking or anything like that, look on the back, look at the label and look for the amounts of ingredients. What I start to say is if you start to see probably more than 5 or 6 ingredients, start to question, okay, why is that in there? Is that something that I probably should be having? So really trying to go off that ingredients label as well. And of course, if you're someone that's looking for allergens, that's where you start to see those things. Does it contain gluten? Does it contain soy? Does it contain any sort of dairy products or anything like that? So that's the other thing when we're sort of going to the supermarket. I also think though too, and I'm sure everyone will agree, it's where we can start to source our food from other areas. So where we can start to support more locally, whether that's going to a local market, greengrocer, whatever that might be. And I think that's just another aspect too, as modern women, is that's giving also time back to ourselves. So if we say, look, on the weekend, I'm going to go on a Saturday or Sunday to the markets, that's my time for me, I'll get my food there. You know, it's making, I guess, an occasion of that. So,
and the good thing about that too is, particularly if you are going to markets, that's seasonal produce.
Exactly.
So it's ensuring you're eating seasonally, and you don't really have to think about it. And obviously, you know, if it's seasonal produce, it's fresher, it's got more nutrients in it. It's what your body needs at that time of the year as well. So that's a really good way to not have to think too much about what is seasonal food, because the market has it all there.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. I love that. And I remember, you know, when my kids were little, going to like, you know, organic markets and things like that, you'd see actually a lot of young families, you know, mums and dads with young children, and it becomes like a family outing. You know, I love that. And I know that for me, I always used to take my kids to an organic farm, and for me it was very important that my kids would run around and actually see the food growing in the ground, right? And they can see where their food like kind of come from. So I love that idea.
Exactly, Lizma. I think that's that whole process too of how mindful we're being about our food. So also too, like you said, where we're seeing where it's actually coming from, where it's originating from, and basically from what we call, you know, paddock to plate. When you sit down to that meal, you know what's gone into that. So we have even more of an appreciation for it then.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, so I've heard like stories years ago that kids, you know, if you ask them where does potato chips come from, they'd be like, well, from the supermarket. None of them have ever seen a potato growing in the ground, right? And I thought that was kind of sad, you know, that kids don't know where their vegetables and foods and things like that come from. I think the label that's an excellent point, Danielle. Like, you know, if you look at like processed bread, if you take bread, for instance, I mean, there's like tons. I mean, there's like 10 or more ingredients on it. And when you look at something like more like an artisan bread, which is kind of like the old way of baking it, it should just have 4 ingredients, right? Flour, water, salt and oil, I believe, or something like that. So great tip in terms of if you're in doubt, look at the amount of ingredients. The rule of thumb is the least amount of ingredients on the label always wins.
Exactly. And if you don't understand if you don't know what it is, that's a pretty big indicator that you shouldn't be eating it. Or if that's the numbers and things like that, and you've got to sit there and try and decipher what actually that means, and that just put it back.
Absolutely. And I guess that's also kind of points out the whole fortification of food thing as well. You have to ask yourself the question, if something had to be fortified, how, that just kind of like explains how processed that is. Like they took all those nutrients out and now they're putting it back in.
In a synthetic form even, which is even worse.
Even worse, exactly. Yeah. And I think we were touching on this before too, when we were talking around food diversity as well. So, and I think that when, like Nick was touching on with when we're going to the markets, that seasonal approach, we're also then probably having that diversity and more variety in our diet as well, naturally. So we might be eating fruits that we're not eating all the time. We're eating different vegetables, different herbs and spices. And I think that's a common thing and theme we see, and I know even I've been guilty of it in the past, is that you sort of stick to your normal, veg that you buy each week, and you cook them because you know how to cook them and you enjoy them. But it's where can we step out of that and get people to have more diversity in their diet?
Absolutely. And using more herbs. For me, that came a little bit later in life because, you don't think about these things when you're young and all of that. But I started loving growing parsley and rosemary and stuff like that in the garden, starting to use that in cooking because, as we know, as naturopaths, there's so many benefits to herbs, right? They've got so many phytochemicals and antioxidants. A lot of them have like antibacterial activity. So it's such a simple thing that you can just use in small amounts in cooking, and that already just makes the meal so much more nutritious, right?
And as naturopaths, everything is about food as medicine as well. And it really is. And as you said, Elisma, herbs and spices can be so powerful in helping to heal us. So it's really important.
And they're easier to grow too.
So easy.
They are.
I'm not the veggie garden type. If I try to do a veggie garden, they'll all die. But the herbs I find that survives in my garden because I don't need that much care. So it's even if you can't grow your own vegetables, there's obviously little things that you probably can grow, right? And
definitely.
That's it.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I guess we can talk now about what are the things we see, particularly with clients when they are out of balance with their nutrition, if they are following extreme diets and things like that, because that's a really common thing as well, that we see that someone is following the latest diet, or they're on keto, they're on, low carb or something like that, and it's not working for them, but they continue to do the diet because they are told and they've read about the fact that it's what they're supposed to be doing. And I think that becomes a really big problem. So, really even coming back to what you said earlier, Dan, about listening to your body, and if something is not working for you, you're not feeling great, then that's a really good indicator that it's not the right thing for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly right, Nick, because I think sometimes we fall into that trap of maybe saying this is a diet that I need to follow, whether it's for weight loss or for some condition we might have. So if we go paleo for this reason, we might have an autoimmune condition. And then we're following that diet, and I think it's then coming back to checking in with, well, how am I actually feeling on this diet? And so often we see that women are then coming to us and saying, well, my digestion's not great. I feel awful. I'm bloated all the time. My bowel movements are all over the place. My energy, that's a big one for me. It's like if your energy is not good, that diet clearly isn't then giving you what you need day to day. And you're clearly not then breaking down those foods, taking the nutrients that you need to. So there's no harm in if someone might function better on a higher fat diet, but are you actually even breaking down those fatty acids and they're being used for energy in your body? If that's not happening, we need to come in and find ways to better support that. So I think it's really looking at those symptoms that as a result of maybe being on this diet, is this diet actually not serving you where it should be? So, and digging into those a little bit deeper.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And there can even be, even though I don't really like harping on about genetics and stuff like that, but we have different genetic expressions which can also influence how we process certain foods, saturated fats or things like that, And very important that you have to listen to your body. We've kind of lost that art a little bit, I feel.
Yes.
You know, we sort of like, we're not really switched on to when we feel hungry or when we're full. It's like we have to have a recipe to follow, regardless of how it makes us feel, because that's what they say we should eat. You know, it's like the old food pyramid thing. Well, the food pyramid looks like this. That's what I'm supposed to eat, even if I do feel bloated or get constipated or what have you. And then I think it's very important to get back into that connection with how we feel. When are we hungry? Do we really need to eat right now? Do we really need that type of food right now? Because, you know, even like if you experience times of stress, which can then influence digestion, it may be that certain foods at that point in time can flare up digestive issues and things like that. So it's not always about looking at food as good or bad. It's timing, isn't it? And amount and portions and all of that kind of stuff.
And also people that, you know, come to us and they say, well, I can't eat that food. It just I flare up. It's just something that I can't eat. It's not the food that's the problem. It's what's going on that's causing that issue. So I think that's a big thing as well. Particularly FODMAP, we see a lot of the time where people be on FODMAP for years and years and years, and it's not designed for that. So you know, these particular types of diets that are put there for a reason so that we can work on the underlying condition and then start to bring in those foods again. So I find that that's a really big challenge as well, is to get people back to the mindset of this isn't forever. These foods aren't bad. It's just that there's something else going on that we need to address so that you can bring them back in and have a more balanced diet again.
Exactly right, Nick. I think it's bringing people out of that mindset of restriction. I think we see that so many times. They walk into us and they say, look, I feel like there's so many foods I can't eat. So what is left for me to eat? And I agree with you, Nick. That's particularly with some of those more clinically focused diets, whether it's FODMAP or a keto diet for a short period of time, they have, as practitioners, we use them for an intention and an intended period of time. But the goal is to get that person back to eating a variety of foods, a diverse diet, and feeling like they do have that choice. They can go, I can eat that and feel good. So
But did you guys find that it's a lot of people or a lot of clients become scared of going off a diet, right? So because it's like they're scared their symptoms, whether it's eczema or whatever, is going to come back, or they're going to start putting on weight. So there is a bit of, there can become like a fear element of going off restricted diets.
But what's driving that is not being addressed. And that's so common with the underlying condition is not addressed. And so these people are having issues and they are fearful because they do flare and they have all these other things going on that they just won't. And they'll go years and years and years before it gets to a point where they have to address it. And sometimes it can be really simple things that we can adjust, and then they can get back to not having these reactions to the foods.
So, all right. So, looking, you know, at foods and things like that, and if we want to, like, you know, be healthier and use more vegetables and things like have healthier meals. So what do we do, you know, because I know when, you know, even now I'm a very, very busy person, like most and like all women, I would say, out there. And especially, you know, when my kids were young, very, very, you know, it's just not enough time. And I was a bit obsessive about everything needs to be organic and I need to make everything at home and all of that. So if we want to be healthy, but we are a little bit limited in time, what are the kind of things we can do to not have to go and phone Domino's, you know, every night and because there's no food on, you know, you're too tired to make meals or it's just too much effort. What's the kind of stuff we can do?
I think one of my most simple kitchen hacks, I'd say, Elizma, is cutting up vegetables in advance. So basically, if you do your sort of grocery shop on the weekend on a Sunday, go to the markets on a Sunday, whatever that is, looking at that veg and saying, okay, I'm probably going to be using that in certain dishes through the week, or that's the intention. I want to use that in some dishes this week, or I want to have some of those things there as a snack. So whether it's, you know, some raw carrot sticks, celery, cucumber, whatever that is, cutting those things up in advance and having them in the fridge ready to go. So that way, when you're coming home from work on a Wednesday night, really late, and you're going, I need to cook a meal, you've got that veg ready. It's already it's already chopped up, and we know that takes the time, really.
Yeah.
That's already ready to go. You can pop that in a pan, in a stir fry, whatever that is. So that's one of my really simple kitchen hacks. And then, like I said, if, you know, having those things on hand as snacks, so that way if they're in the fridge ready to go, I know I'm also then starting to get more veg in my diet, just purely because I'm snacking on those things as well. So,
Yeah, it's a great tip. What about you, Nick?
Well, I mean, coming from a fitness background, I've always done food prep.
Yeah.
You know, that's been me. But I think even for, you know, mothers, busy career women, that they still have those challenges and those time constraints. And I just think food prep can be a really good way to even begin to get your head around having that food there and eating well. And, you know, on a Sunday afternoon, if you're home, or Saturday, whatever day you like, you can get into the kitchen and make it fun. So I used to put on music, or I put on my favourite podcast or things like that, you know, and sort of just make it really fun so that doesn't become a chore, and you're putting love into the food, which I think is really important as well, because that energetics really does
so true.
transfer back to physiology. So food prep I think is a really, really good way to get even for 3 or 4 days worth of food in your fridge and your freezer. And just make it fun, because we make everything a chore and we rush everything. And then it comes back to that being present and being mindful and really focus on what you're doing and enjoying it.
Absolutely, Like one of the things I love doing is my slow cooker gets a big workout. So I like that kind of food anyway. But it's like, so I can easily put stuff in a slow cooker and let it go on for a day or two, you know. And, you know, I'll just eat out of the slow cooker, and then whatever is left over gets frozen, and that's frozen meals kind of for the rest of the week kind of thing. And another thing that I found quite helpful is doing like cooking mince, freezing cooked mince, or freezing cooked bacon, like little bacon pieces, or cooked chicken pieces, because you can take that, you can use it in curries, stir fries, you know, whatever you want to do. So that can sometimes cut down time as well. And
I think just recognising that we don't all have to be cooking gourmet meals every night for the family, or, you know, we're looking at Instagram and all these great food pictures, and you know, that's not reality. You know, they're snapshots. And, you know, it doesn't have to be some grand, you know, meal that we're preparing every night. It can be something simple and just pulled out of the freezer, and, you know, it's still healthy, it's still balanced.
Absolutely, because I think that happened with when all these cooking shows came out, like MasterChef. I remember there was like there was pressure on females, like, you know, to you know, have these grand or special dinners and things, you know, the old like meat and 3 veg just wasn't cutting it anymore kind of thing, right? And then that can also become very stressful, can't it, you know?
Exactly.
I know one of the worst thing that my husband could have asked me when my kids were little was, what's for dinner tonight? You know, I was like, I don't want to think about it. It's just too much. I don't want to think about it, right?
And that's another really good tip as well, a meal menu prep. So sitting down with the family one day a week and going, okay, what is it that you want to have this weekend? Having it all written out so that you don't have to come home and go, okay, God, now everyone's yelling at me and wanting something to eat. It's there, it's ready, you know what you're going to have that night. And that can take away a lot of pressure as well with having to come up with something.
I've started like getting into the thing of my teenage boys, them making their own food. So we'll do things like pizza nights where they have to make their own pizzas or they make their own nachos or whatever. Great way of teaching kids some responsibility as well, and that, you know, one day they're not going to be at home anymore and mum's not going to cook meals for you, so you got to learn how to make yourself some bacon and eggs and stuff like that, right? So just taking some pressure off mums there.
Definitely.
So what about exercise? Like, exercise is a big one because as women, you know, for us, it's very important to feel good about ourselves because it influences how we feel, but also our relationships and things like that. And so exercise is certainly a big one there. Whether it's, and it's not all to do with how you look and you know weight loss. It's also a mind thing, right? Like we need some kind of stress release. And I know exercise for me was always a big stress reliever. So in terms of exercise, you know, what are the what are your experiences with exercise and the challenges that you may have had?
Well, I guess I'll go, being from the fitness background and having my own challenges as well. So, you know, I've gone through the whole overtraining issues and things like that came with the industry that I was in. And that I see that all the time with that overtraining, because women, they do want to perform at their best. There's a lot of pressure on them, as you said. Again, social media, the image thing, you know, and they're looking at images of these fitness models that they're not reality again. They're not sustainable physiques, and they're trying to become that and sustain that, and that's where they're having problems. So it does come back again, as everything we're going to talk about today, balance essentially. So, you know, and as Dan said, with the eating and how you feel when you eat, it's the same when you exercise. If you're exercising and you're finding that you're exhausted after a workout, or you're not making gains or progressing the way you want to, hitting your goals, things like that, or you find that you're going backwards, they're really big signs that you are doing a little bit too much for where you're at the moment. You know, it could well be that you're just working really hard, or you've got a lot of extra stress, and then you're trying to throw in an hour of exercise a day on top of that, and it's not going to work. So it's a matter of just sort of amending and changing things up for what is happening in your world, you know. And if you are really stressed and you'll run off your feet, then maybe pull the exercise back a little bit, because we don't want exercise to become detrimental to your health. It's supposed to be there to enhance it. And so that's what we really need to be mindful of.
Because that's very easy to do, isn't it? Like, you know, I had a kind of similar experience. It's like if you go that overtraining way, you're going to get like a really excessive amounts of cortisol being released and things like that, right? And so you will have things like it'll start interfering with your sleep. It'll start interfering with weight loss and things like that, because cortisol can then neutralize thyroid hormones and all of that kind of stuff. So it's not always about more being better, is it?
No. And obviously I did body sculpting, so it was very aesthetic type of sport. And so you had to look a certain way. And I was on stage and everyone's saying, oh, you're so healthy. I had underactive thyroid. I actually didn't have a period for 8 years.
Wow.
I had a lot of issues, but nobody saw it on the outside. They just look at what you look like. But that is what actually can happen, and it can take a long time to come back from that. So you don't want to get to that point.
Because some of the, you know, that's always the funniest thing. Like when I look at pathology tests from athletes, they sometimes have worse markers than some of my chronically ill clients, right? So we sometimes think that these athletes or these people who look so good on the outside are really super healthy, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No.
No,
not at all.
That's it. I think I've, you know, the same as both of you probably, Nick and Elizabeth, I've had my own sort of battles with that over-exercising as well. I come from a bit of a different background. I did so much sport as a child and in my teenage years, but I did that out of enjoyment. So I was always that kid that was so active, and I love sports. So actually coming into my 20s was really tough transition, because then I was, you know, at uni, I was working, all of those sorts of things, and then it was exercise didn't become enjoyable. I wasn't playing those team sports, I wasn't dancing like I used to. So then I started to go into the gym and do things that I thought I needed to do to sort of hit those goals, and I really quickly fell into that over-exercising category. And I saw the own challenges with myself, you know, that sort of adrenal dysfunction, that potential burnout. I've definitely been there. So, and what I see with women when I talk to them is I can see almost then the stages that they might be in terms of that over-exercising, and where it can be a really difficult conversation, because I know so many of us use it for that stress relief. We're going to do that exercise because we've had a long day at work or whatever that might be. And that's our time for us, which I love. But I think it's then starting to reprioritize, where can we change that? So I often really work on the intensity of the exercise with some of my clients. So if I think that someone, if they're, like Nick said, is feeling exhausted after their training, they're not feeling good, one of the most common things is I'm exercising 5-6 days a week, high intensity, and I'm putting on weight. That's a big one. So that's where we need to actually say, look, this could now, as you said, Elizabeth, be working against your body in some way. It's creating a lot of inflammation, cortisol skyrocketing, now it's affecting thyroid, now your metabolism's affected, and now your body's not responding to that level of exercise.
Absolutely. I remember because I was a competitive runner in half marathons and things like that, long distance running, and I remember at the at the peak of my fitness, because I was training like 3-4 hours a day kind of stuff, right? And I remember I had so much cortisol constantly, because I was limiting my calories. Obviously, breaking down muscle tissue to sort of like fuel that. And I remember, because I had to my only time of exercising was 4 o'clock in the morning because I had to get the kids ready for school and all of that.
Yeah.
So, but then I would be at nighttime, I couldn't sleep because of the cortisol. So I would have to get 3 hours of sleep maybe, and then I'd have to be up and I'd have to go and do a 30K run. And you can do that for only so long, and then your body starts to break down.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then if you can't train and you can't get that dopamine hit and you can't get that stress relief, it's just the worst thing, you know.
It's exciting.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that phrase, we all hear it, it's that burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
Because whilst you're then trying to keep up that level of exercise and everything else going on in your life is demanding things of you. So and so it's almost like we're always putting out all of that energy. When are we actually then starting to bring that back into ourselves? So
Absolutely. It is having to nourish and make sure that your nutrition equals the energy expenditure as well, right?
Exactly.
Because if you're not, the way that most people do it these days is they eat as if they're going to do like a marathon, but they don't do any exercise, right?
Yes.
So it's like they're carb loading. And you think, well, for what, you know?
For Netflix.
That's right. But then the opposite is also true. If you're extreme dieting and your energy output is a lot more of the macronutrients than you put in, that's going to also end in disaster eventually, right?
Exactly.
And there's the other side of the coin as well, for people that aren't exercising, that maybe don't feel like they have enough time, or things, they're too busy, and that's something they really want to do. And I guess we need to sort of focus on it. Is really important to get some exercise every day, and it's not a matter of going out in there and flogging yourself for an hour. It could be just getting up and going for a half an hour walk, or we just need to have that movement. That's what our body's designed to do. So I think that's a really important part as well,
sure.
and you need
Definitely.
that. You can use that time for you before you have to start your day and get the kids ready or get to the office and that sort of thing. So trying to find ways around the challenge of not feeling like you have enough time for exercise. So I mean, what sort of tips would you guys have for that?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that was one of the lessons that I had to learn over the years. Because I would always look at exercise as, well, I had to go out and run for an hour. And if I couldn't do that hour run, there's no point in doing it, right? And so what that's taught me is like, look, even if it's okay to just go for a 20-minute walk.
That's right.
You don't have to sweat and lie gasping on the floor for air. That's not what exercise is supposed to be.
No.
Because it's also important to get enjoyment out of it.
Yes.
Because I don't know, for me there was a time when I started hating running, and I used to love it, but then it becomes a chore. So I made myself a promise that I'm never going to let exercise become a chore again. I wanted to be a stress reliever, enjoyment, all that kind of stuff. So much more in that listening to my body, like what's the energy I have today that I can put out, and what do I feel like doing?
Exactly.
And it's just about doing something.
Exactly.
And not waiting for the next day or making excuses, isn't it?
And that's the thing. I mean, even a 10-minute walk in the morning is better than an hour's workout in the gym that you're never going to do.
Yes.
It's just something is a start, and even if it is just get up 10 minutes earlier before the kids wake up, or, that sort of thing. Or if you have sort of a lunch break and you can go outside for 20 minutes and go for a walk around the block, or that's just a good way to start. There's little things that you can do to get it in there.
Exactly, Nick. And I think it's making that commitment to yourself. And as you said, Elizabeth, I really like that. Almost then getting to the point where we wake up each morning going, what's going to serve me best today in terms of exercise? Is it just a 20-30 minute really light walk around the block? Great, I'm getting my movement in that way. Or actually, am I feeling like I can do something maybe a little bit more high intensity or something like that? And I think that's how we can approach it, because it brings back that enjoyment definitely back into there. And once again, it even comes back to finding ways to get movement without even realizing that you're probably doing some sort of exercise,
So like climbing stairs instead of taking the elevator, right?
Exactly. It's those little things. I know stand desks, we've got them here, and I'm trying to do more standing each day because I recognize, wow, I'm sitting down a lot. So it's trying to get that natural flow of movement back into our lives, because so many of us, I know, we're sitting down, we're driving, we're basically sort of deviated from what probably our ancestors used to do. They were always on their feet, and they weren't technically going to the gym and doing a 1 hour exercise class, were they?
No.
So they were, if we can get back to that, and, where I like to, start to inject even on weekends, can I go for a hike somewhere? So I'm seeing something new, don't even feel like I'm really exercising, but I'm getting my steps and things up.
Instead of running on a treadmill. I used to hate running on a treadmill. It's like boring as anything.
Oh my gosh.
Can't do it.
Right?
You couldn't pay pay me to go on a
No,
treadmill.
I'd rather not kill me.
But it's important, like, I'm glad you brought up the standing desks and things like that, because, if the sitting posture, it creates a lot of postural issues, doesn't it? Shortening of the hamstrings.
Yes.
I mean, I know, coming from South Africa, you'd see a lot of people squat, so if they wait for the bus stop, for instance, they'll sit in like a squatting position. But I don't really see kids squatting anymore. Like a lot of them can't squat, right?
No.
Because the muscles and everything is it's not conducive to that natural movement, right?
Yeah. And that's another really good point as far as children. If you have young children and you want to bring them up to be healthy and to do the movement, that sort of thing, you get out there with your kids. Move around with your kids, show them that exercise is fun. And you're also having family time. You're not focusing on I've got to exercise. You're focusing on having fun and having a laugh. You're still moving around, and that's all exercise, and that's all really just as important.
That's right.
Yeah.
And allowing the kids to climb trees and stuff, which I know you can't do in schools anymore.
Yes,
I know. Yeah. But that's where they get all the skills of balancing and strength and all of the monkey bars and all of those things that you don't really see anymore. But very, very important exercise. And something else I'll kind of like bring up as well, because there is that, we talked about looking good, like all this pressure of Instagram models and things like that these days. Everyone seems to be an Instagram model these days. I don't know. But there's a lot of pressure, that we have to be everything to everyone. And I'll kind of like, I remember when I was working in, I was in contact with a lot of the companies that sell bodybuilding supplements, so reps. I had to deal with a lot of the sales reps to do with bodybuilding companies, and I remember a lot of them used to say, if there was like one of these fitness magazines and you'd have the female with the six-pack on the front, they'd say they don't really look like that in real life. You realize that's heavily photoshopped, because they know these models or these athletes, and like that's not really what they look like. And I think it's important for us as women to always remember that, I mean, Photoshop is a big thing in the industry, even on Instagram. So comparing ourselves to people and trying to emulate something that's not real is kind of also, it's just a waste of energy, isn't it?
It is.
And they have the fitness models, and they'll do their comp season, and they'll take hundreds and hundreds of photos, and they'll post them throughout the year. So they're not looking like that throughout the whole year. They might look like that peak for maybe a week.
Yeah.
And that's what these women are trying to attain, and that's why they're getting sick, because it's not, it is unattainable.
It is, yeah. It's completely unachievable, and I think that I agree, it's something that we're then chasing forever. And what are we then really chasing? So if we come back to what's real and looking at ourselves and loving ourselves for who we are and how we look and all of those things, that is what health is. Chasing this image that's not real, we're never going to get there. So let's really try and stop that now. And I know, it's something that I've had my whole life. We're impressionable from such a young age. I even think when I was 12, 13 years of age, that's something that was, I felt like I had to look a certain way.
And how miserable does that make you feel?
It does.
And that's the thing, even the people that are the models, you talk to them about their lives and they are not happy.
No.
It's not, they have no social life, they're so structured. And then we get the, women trying to attain what they're having, and then they're becoming miserable because they're not getting to that point. They've given up their social life to try and get to attain this look. And it's miserable. And I think in the big picture, what is the point of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can remember the amount of time I spent worrying about food. From being a young girl, and it's like such a waste of time. You just think, oh my gosh, I could have done something better. You know,
life is very short.
It is.
You get to your 40s and you think, shit.
That's right. And one of the things, I read something really interesting a while ago, and they had a name for it, like some syndrome name for it, and I wish I could remember it. It may have been something like the Instagram syndrome or something like that. And it essentially came out that apparently with Instagram and a lot of the social media, there's a certain look, right? So the lips have to be a certain size, the breasts have to be a certain size, your eyebrows have to look a certain way. It's apparently like a certain look, and a lot of women are having plastic surgery to attain this specific look. But apparently this look only really looks good on a photo. So apparently they get this work done, they look great on a photo, but if you see them in real life, it's like something's off, right?
Yes.
But apparently they don't care because the photos is the thing that's important, right?
Yeah.
And they're finding that a lot of women are starting to look exactly the same, right? So you're starting to lose that individuality, which makes us so special and quirky and interesting.
That's exactly
But now, all the young girls are just starting to look exactly the same. And I know you go to the Gold Coast and it is like, I don't know, they all look the same. It's scary,
And it is scary, the amount of plastic surgery that young girls are having. It's really scary. And not realising that they're having plastic surgery when they're young and that actually ages them quicker.
Exactly.
So,
And I think that's it. It's we're forgetting our uniqueness, and it's if we can come back to that, and that's where I think also holistic health encompasses that. It's what is unique for us, the way we exercise and move, the way we eat, our emotions, all of those things. That's unique to us as a human being. So if we can find that, especially as women, can come back to that. That's the foundation. So,
No, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, I think the next thing, guys, that we're on to is sleep, which is a big one. We've touched on it a little bit already. So, and I know that this is another one that I personally have also seen the effects of with sleep when we might feel like we're getting enough and still not feeling the benefits that we should from a full night's sleep. So waking unrefreshed, or one that I know that is common for all of us is we see women and they say, I can't fall asleep, so I'm going to bed, my mind's racing, all of those sorts of things. Waking up through the night, so insomnia is a really big one, I think, that we all see. So what would be the challenges that I think you both identify with your clients in terms of sleep and how we can start to improve that for them?
I think for me, the first thing is identifying the reason why, because a lot of women, they don't correlate their sleep issues with what else is happening to them in their life, in their health, that sort of thing. They just think they can't sleep, and that's what it is. So I think identifying the reason why, and also probably really focusing on the importance of sleep and how detrimental it can be to your health if you're not getting enough sleep. It's really important, because overnight is when you do your regeneration, your repair, that sort of thing. So you really need to get that good quality sleep so that you can wake up in the morning and go again. And the less sleep you get each night, and you're getting less and less and less, that's really going to be having a huge impact on your health. HPA axis dysfunction, then we look at thyroid, then we look at gut issues and that sort of thing, and that can all stem even just from not getting enough sleep in the long term. So I think, just really driving home the importance of actually the good quality sleep is the thing that I find women really don't really put enough focus on.
And I'm glad that that's good that we're talking about sleep, because going into a little bit more technical stuff, we all know that sleep is needed to regulate our circadian rhythms, right? Exactly. And our circadian rhythm is, we've got circadian rhythms for all of our hormones in our body. So leptin, insulin, all of these hormones, even estrogen and testosterone. With testosterone, I believe, is like the highest early in the morning when you wake up. And I believe leptin is, I don't know if it's at its highest or lowest level at 12 o'clock at night. I always get a little bit confused with that. But these are the hormones that's involved with fertility and weight loss, weight gain, all of that kind of stuff. So you can do everything right, but if your sleep is disrupted, or you don't get proper sleep, and not according to the rhythms that it's supposed to be, it's kind of like you're sabotaging yourself. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people who do shift work often struggle to lose weight. So I find that's definitely a very important thing, that we really underestimate how important sleep is in our health. Absolutely.
And I think I agree, Elizabeth, going into more of that slightly technical side is, a lot of people then will hear the term melatonin. So are we producing adequate melatonin, which is essentially one of our sleep hormones that we need? And we know that melatonin is such a rich antioxidant as well for the body. So the thing is too, if we aren't getting adequate sleep, we're not supporting that antioxidant status in our body. We're then maybe more prone to oxidative stress, which is that cell damage and cell breakdown. Inflammation can naturally start to stem from there. So I agree, if one of the foundations being sleep, if that is out of balance, we start to see this cascade of more chronic, I think, health conditions flow from there.
Absolutely. And melatonin, it kind of like kicks in around 7, 8 o'clock, right, at night.
That's right.
And that's the first signal that you get that you're starting to feel sleepy. Now, what do most of us do when we start feeling that, getting that signal?
Yeah.
We want to finish the Netflix show that we're watching.
Exactly.
Or we've just put the kids to bed and it's like, no, I want 2 hours for myself. I'm not going to go to bed quite yet, right?
Exactly.
That's what they do.
Yep.
And then when you miss that opportunity, the melatonin can't, because it's just like for a short spike, then you get into your second wind where you don't feel sleepy anymore, right?
Yes,
you're wide
exactly.
awake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's that whole thing, we have to start listening to our bodies again, right?
That's it, Elisma. And I think that term we use a lot, sleep hygiene. It's we really focus on every time when we're seeing pretty much all of our clients, Nick, and you said it before, even with people that might seem to be sleeping well and they have a good sleep routine, just looking at what we're doing pre-bed and around that time that we can even start to inject more ways to improve that sleep as a whole. You know, so it's the blue light, it's the ventilation in the room, it's do you have, you know, artificial light streaming in from the street, something like that. Little things that we just don't even really think about. Are we actually, like you said, Elisma, we're allowing ourselves to get into that calm state? Are we turning off screens, you know, an hour before bed, 2 hours before bed? That's a tricky one, I know. So are we eating too late to bed, so then our digestion is affected? So there's a lot of things when we look at that sleep hygiene concept that we can be doing to get even more benefits from that night's sleep that we have.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of stuff apart from things like the blue light. I found in a lot of my clients blood sugar can also really affect sleep, right? So and that can sometimes be to do with the evening meal or snacking post evening meal. But I find I have had a lot of clients where if their blood sugar is not well maintained, they wake up during the night, and that's probably to do with that cortisol spike, right? To keep the blood sugar kind of balanced. So very important to have, you know, good amounts of protein and fat in an evening meal, and not just all carbohydrates and things like that.
I agree. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also too, as I touched on a little bit earlier, is how we're waking in the morning. That's another thing that gives us a really good indication into that circadian rhythm, as you were saying, Elisma, because I think if we're waking up and we're what we call that cortisol awakening response, if that's firing when cortisol should be rising within that first half an hour to 60 minutes as it should be, then we start to see that, okay, our circadian rhythm's probably in good stead. There's balance there. Our HPA axis is working as it should be. We should have that natural energy in the morning. If we're someone that's waking up, we're rolling out of bed, we're taking 2 to 3 hours to actually just feel like we're human.
Or we need a coffee to get us.
We need a coffee, we need stimulants, we need, you know, by 10 a.m. we've had our third coffee. That's another indication, okay, well, what's happening with your sleep into those early hours of the morning, and how can we start to even work with that morning routine as well?
Absolutely, because your cortisol spikes kind of like mid-morning. That's when it's... So you're supposed to have like tons of energy around 10, 11 when you get stuff done, right?
Exactly,
And so if you're not getting that, well,
that's a sign.
You gotta look out for it. And it's another good point, you know, if we look at our cortisol, because it starts to rise in the morning when we wake up, and then it declines when we go to when it's time to go to bed. So I always found that morning times for me was a great time to exercise. One reason was a bit psychological. It was like, you know, if I did it at the end of the day, the whole day I would think of excuses on why not to do it. So for me, it was better to just in the morning wake up, don't even think about it, put your shoes on, and you go for a run, right? But at the same time, also, if you exercise late at night, and I know that for some people that's the only time, and that's okay. But if you're like at gym, let's say 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, that can also then interfere with sleep patterns, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's when you have to then come home and do those little rituals that help to calm you down, to bring that cortisol level back down, to allow that melatonin to come up. So, you know, relaxing things. Don't come home and turn on the TV and have all that stimulus and, you know, have a glass of wine or whatever you do when you come home from the gym. Some people might. So making sure that, you know, you are calming everything down and getting that cortisol down so you can go to sleep and get a restful sleep. So, you know, things like even just sitting down and doing some breathing, or having a nice warm shower, or reading a book, or, you know, if you find you can't go to sleep straight away, but don't bring in more stimulus, because that's just going to activate that HPA axis.
It was a good point you made there, Nick, with regards to alcohol, because I hear this all the time in terms of people having alcohol, maybe, you know, it's a glass or two with dinner before bed, and then they're waking up through the night, and their sleep isn't as restful from that. So we see that direct correlation with that as well, don't we? So whether it's, you know, that's where now that's cortisol is rising at certain times, you know, 2, 3 a.m., whatever it might be, the liver is now starting to try and detoxify that alcohol as well. So alcohol is a big one from a lifestyle, dietary perspective that can really throw out sleep patterns.
Yeah, because it can help put you to sleep, right?
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of
That's the
people
thing.
will agree, the glass of red wine and I'm out like a light.
Exactly.
But then they can either will wake up the next morning groggy, or they can wake up around midnight and then struggle to fall asleep again, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we know that tryptophan is needed to make melatonin, right?
Yes. Yep.
Now, what kind of foods contain tryptophan that we may like try to increase maybe at nighttime that could potentially maybe help with something like melatonin and sleep?
So your proteins, I think, you know, so getting in, you know, whether it's, you know, some chicken or fish or anything like that, Elisma, I think those proteins, they're the building blocks for the amino acid tryptophan. So if we're getting that in, but also too looking at other ways we can, when we're looking at a meal, like you said, it's getting in some adequate protein, some adequate good fats in there, and then of course, you know, that sort of a variety of veg on your plate as well, because then those cofactors and those minerals, so things like your magnesiums and your B vitamins, they're also needed for that metabolism into things like melatonin. So tryptophan has to go through some steps to get to melatonin. It's got to go into serotonin, then we're going into melatonin. So we need to help support the body to do that along that way. So when, if, you know, even if we're adding in some nuts and seeds into, you know, a salad at night or into our cooking or something like that, they'll be rich in magnesium and B6 and things like that. So that will also support that cascade and that metabolism from the tryptophan from the proteins.
And you brought out serotonin, and that's a good point. Like, because serotonin, we often think of it as the happy hormone or happy neurotransmitter, which is probably, you know, not completely accurate, because I think dopamine is more really involved in there. But serotonin is still very important. You know, a lot of people with anxiety issues will have low serotonin, right? So again, it's so important to manage stress and to have good, healthy relationships, because it's not just about, oh, well, I have stress and that's because I don't sleep. It's because, you know, that can deplete serotonin, which can then just make it harder for you from a biochemical perspective in making things like melatonin and sleeping and things like that.
And then if you are stressed, we go back to the nutrition side, and your digestive system is not firing very well. So you're not able to break down and absorb those nutrients and those amino acids anyway. So it all, you know, it's all one big cycle. So, you know, one part will affect the other. So, you know, you're trying to get some sleep, but you're stressed from the day, then you're not eating properly, then your gut's not functioning properly, so then you're not absorbing your nutrients, then you're not getting to sleep. So it's all a big cycle.
And I know that with sleep, you know, if you get good sleep, you can function really well during the day. You can you know, manage stress a lot better, so you become more resilient when you get stressed. I know that a lot of my clients, a lot of them say, if I can just fix my sleep, everything else will be great. I won't feel anxious. I won't feel tired. And I'll be able to cope with the kids and the husband and everything else. Just fix my sleep, right? So often that is one of the really key areas to focus on.
Yeah, definitely.
So what about stress management? Like, what are you guys? What's your recommendations for clients, or what do you guys do when you're having rough patches, you know, lots of work, or even relationship issues or what have you? What's your outlets, or what is the things that you suggest for clients as outlets for stress?
I would say one of the ones that, and it took me a long time to come back to this, is breathing. So when are we actually recognizing that we're probably not taking deep breaths? And we know that deep breathing, even I think it's, 10 seconds of that deep breathing can start to really tap into the sympathetic nervous system. And so just to give people a bit of an insight into that is when we're stressed, we're heavily in that sympathetic nervous system. When we're breathing, we want to tap into the parasympathetic. And so it's taking ourselves literally in the moment out of that sympathetic response. So we're fight or flight, we're producing lots of cortisol, there's a lot of adrenaline, we're probably a little bit anxious. by using our breath in that moment, we start to come back into the parasympathetic where we can rest, digest, reproduce, which is what it usually is called. So for me, breathing is one of the best techniques because you can do it anywhere. You can, whether you're at work, you're in the car, you're at home, you can literally tap into that. So you don't have to go into a meditation practice, but that's another thing we'll get to. But the breathing itself is one thing that I really, really do focus on for myself and for my clients.
Yeah.
So.
And you touched on an important point, Dan, because a lot of people may not realise that they're stressed, but then if you actually stop and feel that you're actually breathing up into your chest, you are hunched over, you're not able to take in that air, and then so you're not getting enough oxygen, that further activates the HPA axis, and so then the vicious cycle continues. You get more stress, then you can't breathe, and you can't breathe, then you get more stress. So it's a matter of then also, it's like we said the whole way through, coming back to yourself and actually being aware of what's happening in your body. And if you are feeling like you're sort of taking big sighs, or you find that you are hunched over, then just stop and, as Dan said, just take a really deep breath, a belly breath. You know, that's how we're
that belly
naturally
breath,
how we are designed. I mean, you look at a baby, how they breathe through their belly goes up and down, not their chest.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's
shallow breathing.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
And oxygen, I mean, I think almost every single enzyme in your body needs oxygen to kind of like activate certain biochemical processes. Oxygen is obviously gives us energy, makes us think, concentrate. And I actually found that a lot of people, a lot of their health issues would be to do with breathing. You know, that's how I can't think, I can't focus, I'm so tired all the time. And a lot of the time, it's just not about getting adequate oxygen. So sometimes that's the sleep apnea stuff to do with snoring and not getting enough oxygen. But breathing, I think I know that every time I've been to a conference and they teach you how to breathe properly, it feels kind of uncomfortable.
Yes,
it does.
Which emphasizes how we don't breathe. It's not a natural thing for us to breathe properly, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Exactly
it's not.
So very important thing to go back to, even if it sounds silly, breathing. Clean air, oxygen, very important as the foundations of health, right?
Oh,
Definitely. Yeah.
And I think with that, Elizabeth, clean air, oxygen, one of the best ways we tap into that is in nature. So is that a way that and I know once again, I really focus on that with stress management and mindfulness and that whole foundation together is how often are we actually getting outside and connecting with nature? That's going to give us so much back in regards to our health.
Yeah, because it's kind of like ironic, you know, you see pictures of runners, and I was guilty of that too, but, you know, running next to a very, very busy road with cars and exhaust fumes and stuff. And you think, well, is that really healthy? You know, it's kind of a bit counterproductive. And I realize for some people they don't have a choice. But if you do, you know, try and run in the back roads, in suburbia, in nature, along the beach, you know, if you're lucky enough to live close to a beach. So,
Even in suburbia, there's still parks.
Yeah.
There's still little parks. You can still get out, even if you do live in a really built-up area. There's still little green belts you can go to and get a little bit of nature and sit under a tree, or, you know, just get a bit of sunshine, and that can make a world of difference too.
Grounding. I find grounding is, for me, that's... If I can just go and sit in a park with my bare feet on the grass for a couple of hours, I'm fine.
Yes.
You know? And maybe that's got to do with star signs and stuff, because I'm a Taurus, which is supposed to be an earth, you know, sign. But, you know, earthing is my stress reliever.
I think it's really effective. And how often do people get around and get outside without their shoes on?
Barefoot.
Pretty much never.
No one.
I mean, you go to the beach and you dig your feet into the sand, and how great does that feel? You know, and that's because there is an energetic component to that, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, I think grounding's a great one. In looking at other sort of stress management, Nick, what would you sort of utilize for some of your clients? I know we've touched on breathing, we've touched on nature, getting that oxygenation. What other things do you use?
I recommend a lot of times, because a lot of clients that we see are very highly stressed. They don't have time to stop. They don't think they have time to stop. They get very overwhelmed. And I even say, just if you feel like you are getting very overwhelmed, you can't breathe properly, a little bit of that anxious feeling, take yourself away somewhere quiet for 10 minutes, even 5 minutes if you can. Just get rid of all the external stimulation, be somewhere nice and quiet, and again, just breathe. And that's a really good way just to calm yourself, to get yourself back into balance and to focus again. And it also lets you assess what's actually going on around you, because when we're in the middle of it, we just think everything's going wrong, and we can't really figure out how we're going to fix it. So take yourself away from that situation, and then just really come back to yourself, and then you can see clearly and go back out there and face, okay, I'm going to work on this problem first, or, my boss wants me to do this, or my kids are yelling at me over here and I've got a phone call, or, I think that can be really powerful, even just as a beginning for people who really do struggle to stop.
That's it.
Yeah, and I like that idea, like especially if you're having an argue with your significant other, or the kids are screaming and playing up, one of the best things you can do, if it is possible, and you can do it, in a safe way, in terms of, leaving the children with someone, is just go for a walk around the block. There's no point in staying in a situation if it's not serving anyone.
Exactly.
It's better to kind of remove, and then everyone can calm down, and then you can think about things a lot clearer, right?
Yeah. It's just that clarity of mind, that in that space where we take ourselves away from the tasks that we think we have to do and that stressful situation, like you were saying, Nick, if we can start to bring some clarity and calmness and that peace to our mind, then I think we can start to show up to the rest of our day in a much more, less stressed way. I think so often we're just going from moment to moment, continuing that stress response on without even realising it. That's where it becomes a very, I think, almost subconscious reaction that we're living in. So we sort of get to the end of the day and go, we were probably living more in that fight or flight response than we realised. And that's where we then see, of course, as practitioners, that cascade of effects of chronic health issues from that chronic stress. And I think we touched on that a bit earlier, Nick, in terms of looking at acute stress and chronic stress, and where did the lines then start to blur? So when people might feel like, no, I was really stressed in that situation, but is that stress still continuing in some way in your life? And then that's where these stress management mindfulness techniques really are the foundation, the anchor to pull us back into, okay, where can I start to support myself and reduce that stress every day? It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be some breathing. It can be 10-minute meditation. It can be going outside in nature, grounding, like you said, Elisma. They're all the things that add up to so much.
But even the mindfulness that you pointed out, and I love that. Like a lot of us tend to either live in the future or in the past, right? And the past brings in depression, because we look back and we're like, well, I'm 40 years old. What have I done with my life? I'm not the millionaire I thought I was going to be. I didn't find my knight in shining armor and don't have the 2 kids and the picket fence like I thought I was going to have, right? We all have challenges different, when we're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. I think when you get to 50, 60, you probably don't care about any of the stuff anymore, right? But we're not there yet.
You care a little bit less.
That's right, you care a little bit less.
Each decade you care a little bit less.
It's like, oh, well, it's not going to happen. Get over it, right? But, so the past can bring a lot of depression about things we haven't achieved, or our life just not going the way we thought it was going to go. Not the dream job or anything like that. And then the future, being in the future the whole time, brings anxiety, because it's like, I've got to still do this, I've got to still achieve this, I've still got to, how am I going to get to that point? And so it's very important to kind of get back in the present. Forget about tomorrow, forget about yesterday. Yesterday happened, you can't change yesterday. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. The only thing you can change is today and the right now, right? And so just getting back into that present space can also be a huge thing.
And the thing I love, I was told a long time ago, and it stuck with me, is there is no future. Because when you get to the future, it's now. So you never actually get to the future, because then it's always here, and tomorrow is always going to come. So you can either be anxious about it, or you can just be here now and be happy and be with what's around you, because tomorrow's going to happen either way.
That's right.
So there's no point worrying yourself about it. It doesn't change anything.
No. Exactly. Or you could be in a car accident tomorrow, and then you've been worrying about what's going to be in the next 10 years, and there isn't even a next 10 years. So the only thing you can do is appreciate the day or the time that you're in and make the best of it. And I think I've always had that philosophy, because it's very easy to kind of get caught up with daily stuff, especially, as we get very busy, and especially if we've got children and stuff, we forget about ourselves. Everything's about the husband, the partner, the children, all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of women realize when their kids are out of they finish school and they're out of the house, I don't know who I am anymore, right? It's like I don't have hobbies. I don't have. I've given all of that stuff up when I got children.
Yeah.
What do I do now? And then it can be like that thing of, well, all of a sudden, the husband and wife are together and they're like, well, this is strange. They kind of drifted apart a little bit because everything was about the children. So there can be like a big thing of finding oneself again kind of in those years as well, right?
For sure. I think along the journey, Elisma, at any age, at certain stages in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever that is, I think we all go on those different journeys of finding ourselves in that time as well. So I love that concept. I love that if we're bringing that back to the present and what we need right now for ourselves, that's the journey we're on, you know, and that will change. That's the other thing, and we talk about with health all the time, our health needs and our health challenges that might come along the way, those things will change. But it's just adapting and working with that situation as it arises, and not focusing, as you said, on tomorrow. We can't control that, so let's loosen the grip a bit, I think.
And also not giving up, not giving up yourself just because you feel like you have to focus on everyone else.
Exactly.
And that can sometimes be tricky. Like what I used to do, because running for me was very, very important. My kids were very little. So what I used to do is I'd go to running competitions. I'd bring the kids with, my partner was very supportive. He'd bring the kids with, and I would enroll them in the little kiddies races that they would have there. So that helped me maintain my hobby and my interests, but involving the family in that as well, so that it doesn't become a stress of, leaving the kids with a partner and going off and doing things by yourself. So you can find ways of maintaining hobbies or interests for yourself, and some of those, you may be able to kind of involve the family as well. But I think it's very important not to give yourself up at any point.
I mean, this is your life. You're the one living this life. No one else is living that for you. So. Yes, we have our family and our friends and our children, and of course we live for them and we do for them, but you also have your own life as well, and I think that's really important. And women on a whole, we do forget about that so often, and I know from a personal standpoint, I was in that situation. I was married for a long time. My husband had a military career, so we were travelling a lot, and we would never settle anywhere, and so my life was his life. I didn't have my own life. Then I lost my husband, and I sat there and I went, I don't even know what to do anymore. I've never had my own life. I had no identity. I didn't know what I liked. And I think a lot of women really go through that, particularly mothers, as you say. They live for their children and they forget about themselves. And it's, life is short. You have to do what you love, because this is the one, you get one chance, one experience. And so why not make it a great experience rather than a stressful experience?
It's not about being selfish, right? Because I think that's always like stopped women from doing that, because it's like the guilt, right?
Right, yeah.
But very, for me, the thing has always been that drives me is like, when I'm on my deathbed, am I going to be happy with the way that the stuff that I've done, the chances, the risks that I've taken, and to be quite honest, I'm ready to go tomorrow. I've done everything that I wanted in my life, so I'm very, very happy with what I've achieved. Do I want to be on my deathbed and think about all the time I wasted on diets and worrying about what I look like and all of that? No.
And that's exactly how I live my life. I would go to do something, or I'll stress about something, and I go, when I'm on my deathbed, I think about it all the time. Is that going to really matter?
Yes.
Is that something that's going to be significant in my life? No, then don't worry about it.
That's right.
And I think the thing that we all can agree on is that when we give back to ourselves, we're giving to other people.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think as women, because we feel like we always have to show up for everyone else first, and then there's nothing left for us. But how about we start giving back to ourselves? And we know that's just naturally giving back to others. When we're happy, when we're doing things we love, when we're going about our days feeling, that we're living the life we're choosing to live, the people around us see that.
Yes.
So I think
it's like that old adage, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help anyone else.
So true.
So if you're going to go down because you're doing everything for everybody else and you're totally burnt out, what good are you going to be to anybody?
Exactly.
So look after yourself first so you can look after everybody else.
Exactly.
I think, that's really important.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great note to finish
to end
on.
I think so too. Yeah. Well, this is great.
Yeah, it is great.
It's great having the girls.
I know, just the girls.
I know.
No, it's no jokes from the back end or anything like that.
But I think we touched on some really, really key important points. Remember, this was about foundations of health.
Yes.
So obviously there's a lot of detail that can be gone into in a lot of these areas. But, if you don't take care of the foundations, then, everything else is a bit of a waste of time.
Exactly.
And often when you take care of the foundations, 50 or more % of people will get better. All the issues go away.
Yeah.
So foundations are very important.
Yeah,
I mean, in natural medicine, that's right. That is the most important thing, and that's what we'll focus on before anything. So we can give you all the supplements in the world, but they're not going to do anything if you're not got these core foundations right. So it is really important.
Yeah.
Any last words?
I think we've covered really everything.
I think so.
I was just going to say, I think women just need to realise, from as we represent, as we said at the start, every generation, that every group of women has their own challenges, and you may have children and then you have your own issues there. You may be a career woman and you have issues. You may be a young person that's studying and trying to get ahead. We all have our own stresses. We need to just bring ourselves back. We don't need to look outward and look at what everyone else is doing and try to measure up. We are our own person. We're living our own lives, and we need to just focus on that and what's really important, and not be too worried about trying to outdo or meet someone else's expectations. As women, I think that's really important.
Yeah,
we need to remember.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right.
Cool.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, that concludes our podcast, our first Modern Women podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions on what you want us to talk a bit more, absolutely let us know. But good talking to you guys.
Yeah, you too, Elizabeth. Thanks,
right.
guys.
Thanks,
Have a great
guys.
day.
Cheers.
Bye.